All right, let's talk Kundalini, folks. Let's talk Kundalini. So I got an email today from someone who wanted to know if it was safe for them to do my Integrate Your Kundalini Awakening course. And in the email, they said that they had had a full Kundalini awakening. Come back to that. And then with the help of ChatGPT, had figured out how to deal with it. Okay, first thing, you've not had a full Kundalini awakening, because a full Kundalini awakening, according to the text, like, and I'm referring to the Tantric text, remember that Kundalini is a term that arises within Tantra and within yoga. So if you're talking about Kundalini, you are grounding it within Tantra and yoga, right? Kundalini awakening, a full Kundalini awakening leads to total enlightenment and literally leaving the body because you've completed the wheel of samsara. So no, if you're sending me an email, ask me the questions, you have not had a full Kundalini awakening, right? So that's the first thing. And I'm guessing that information came from ChatGPT. Second thing, do not use ChatGPT to find out about Kundalini. And the reason for that, like the reason I'm going to give you, is that there is so much bullshit out there on the internet about Kundalini that is absolute garbage. It is not true. It is not grounded. It is not real. That when you ask ChatGPT about Kundalini, it is aggregating all of that bullshit information and then dishing it up as if it is fact. And then you read that and think it's actually fact. And it's not. It's mostly freaking bullshit. If you do decide that you're going to use ChatGPT to try and suss out what's going on with what may or may not be your Kundalini awakening, what I suggest is you are very explicit in the instructions that you give it, and ask that it only draw on traditional tantric or yogic texts or the research and published writings of academic scholar practitioners like Christopher Wallace or Christopher Tompkins. Be very specific, right? And otherwise, you're just going to get so much bullshit. Don't use ChatGPT. Okay, and then just for fun, because we like to have fun, I thought I'd ask ChatGPT why you shouldn't be using ChatGPT to ask about Kundalini. So here's what ChatGPT had to say. The reasons why people shouldn't use ChatGPT for information about a suspected Kundalini awakening. One, I draw from mixed quality sources, and I can't guarantee the user knows which ones come from classical tantras and which ones come from new age telephone game mythology. And I reckon probably 95% of the information on Kundalini on the net comes from new age telephone game mythology. Like, remember, as soon as Arthur Avalon wrote his first book, The Serpent Power, back in the early 1910s, 1920s, like, he got a bunch wrong back then. And then so much of everything was based on what he said in that book. And it's just a telephone game mythology. I can't filter out the century of misinformation about Kundalini that shows up everywhere online. I can't stop people from reading modern interpretations as if they were ancient teachings. I can't correct for the user's preconceived ideas, projections, or wishful thinking. They read what they want to see. I can't pick one school of Tantra or yoga and declare it the authority, because the tradition is not monolithic. And that's really important to understand as well, right? There's so many different lineages and schools of Tantra. Some are dual, some are non-dual, some worship the goddess, some worship Shiva, some worship Vishnu. Like, they all have slightly different ways of perceiving and interacting with reality on the path of liberation and awakening. And if you want to know more on that, see Christopher Wallace's incredible book, Tantra Illuminated. I can't replace direct study of source text, right? Like the Recognition Sutras, for example, lineage teachings, or qualified scholars. That's where you want to go. If you want to find out about Kundalini awakening, go to source text, go to lineage teachings, qualified scholars, or people like me that have lived it for a very long time, done the research, worked with the other teachers, and understand it both from the inside out and through the lineages and the text. I can't just teach, we're still back to ChatGPT. I can't teach the experiential nature of Kundalini through text, and their tradition insists on experiential understanding, right? Experiential understanding. How can people talk about Kundalini awakening if they haven't experienced, they haven't been through the right? You just can't. And that's why someone like Christopher Wallace is great, because he's walking the path as a practitioner and he's an academic scholar. I can't confirm whether someone actually talks about Kundalini or just uses the word because it's trendy, right? Is it actually Kundalini that they're pointing to, or is it just something else completely different? I can't give definite statements without oversimplifying a process that deserves nuance. I can't track cultural context, which leads people to misunderstand technical terms like prana, shakti, and uchara. I could say so much on that, but I'm going to keep going. Can you see all the reasons why ChatGPT is saying don't use me to research Kundalini, right? I can't cut through the user's confusion between trauma activation, spiritual process, and energetic shifts when they only seek information. And this is where it gets really interesting. Like someone once said to me, oh, I think Kundalini awakening should be called trauma awakening, right? Because the trauma that starts to come up when Kundalini awakens doesn't actually have anything to do with Kundalini per se. It's just that the Kundalini awakening process, the physiological shifts and changes that happen to the psyche and the internal system, means that trauma that was once hidden or invisible or suppressed or repressed starts to come up for resolving, right? So all this trauma comes up and it's been triggered, you could say, by the Kundalini awakening, yet it's not directly, it's not because of Kundalini per se. It was always there. It's just the mechanisms that were holding it out of awareness have been disintegrated. It gets complex. And this is why, again, ChatGPT no good. No. You've got to actually find people who get it from the inside out. Okay. I can't translate subtle Sanskrit terms perfectly into English. Some concepts literally lose meaning when flattened into modern language. I can't guarantee that users will separate metaphor from literal teachings. Like this whole thing, Kundalini's a snake. No, it is not. Arthur Avalon calling it the serpent power as if it was this. No, Kundalini is not a snake. Metaphor. Sometimes in the text, it is described as snake-like because of the way that it can move. But Kundalini, right? Kundalini Shakti has nothing to do with snakes at all. I can't represent any lineage as transmission, and textual knowledge without transmission always lands partial. And what that means is that when you receive a teaching, the words, the knowledge from someone who is embodying the teaching and speaking from the place that the teaching implies, there is a transmission of beingness that goes along with the words. When someone does not have that embodied, I don't want to say experience, it's not like an experience, but when that embodiment has not yet unfolded, it's just empty words. ChatGPT is just giving you empty words, right? I can't stop people from cherry picking ideas and turning them into belief systems instead of practice. This is a big thing, right? Awakening means that you begin to master the mind, shift identification from the mind into essence nature, into awareness, and begin to recognize that all beliefs are false. Inherently false. A belief is false. It has to be false because it's a belief, right? And so when you start to believe things about something and you turn that, like the Kundalini stuff, into a belief, you've just literally built yourself a new jail. Whereas really what's happening here is we're breaking ourselves out of jail by seeing through beliefs, dissolving them all, and making things into a practice, I can't give people the embodied nuance needed to understand what the texts mean by awakening, expansion, contraction, or Shakti. And this is what's really interesting, right? Like AI, it doesn't it can't know what it means to be mind identified, to be asleep, unconscious, which you are. I'm gonna, 99.9999% of you are watching this video. Whether you've had Kundalini awakening or not, because Kundalini awakening doesn't necessarily mean the awakening process is actually happening or you're leaning into that, right? But how does ChatGPT know what awakening means? Because does it even know what being mind identified means? And then how can it know what expansion contraction actually means? Or Shakti, right? Remembering that Shakti as a word is pointing toward a direct felt sense of something. And we say Shakti and people see an image of a goddess, right? But that's a pointer. It's not the actual thing. Shakti is not this external female deity out over there. Shakti is the inherent essence, energetic foundation of the entire fucking universe. I can't communicate the difference between Kundalini, described in the classical text, and the pop spiritual version without people misreading the distinction. I can't prevent people from leaning on AI as an authority instead of studying the tradition directly. And I can't replace the slow lived understanding that authentic tantric frameworks require. Now, I love that. And even some of the sentences there show a misunderstanding of the nature of Tantra, of yoga, of Kundalini, etc. But I'm not going to nitpick and go into all of that. But I love that ChatGPT is able to go, oh, here's the reasons why you should not use me to understand Kundalini awakening. So if you feel like something has happened and you don't know what it is, and is it Kundalini awakening, seek out living, embodied, real teachers who know what's going on from the inside out. They've either fully lived through the awakening and integrated it themselves, and or they're also in lineages and studying the text. Yes, that is me. That is, I always hesitate to point you toward me for whatever reason. There's so many amazing teachers out there, but I guess you found this video. You're in front of me right now. So yes, I do support people through Kundalini awakenings. And the worldview, the perspective that I use is Tantra, the awakening and liberation pathway. And my focus isn't so much about managing, controlling, getting back to normal. No, that's just the mind trying to reassert control again. No, what I'm looking at is how do you, how do I support the person to begin to know themselves as essence nature, to actually do the actual awakening bit beyond the energetic phenomenon that may have begun to go off like fireworks, because the energetic phenomenon is not actually awakening. It's just energy stuff starting to happen, which means you're on the path. It means shit's going down. But if you don't like orientate to it with awareness of what is happening and know how to respond, then it's so often just wasted. It's so often just wasted. All right. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why not to use ChatGPT to investigate Kundalini awakening, unless you're very explicit on your prompt. Be very explicit in terms of which sources of information. But even then, just find a teacher. Just find a teacher and do the thing.